What would you do if the man who swore to protect you slapped you in the middle of a hospital while you carried his child inside you? And beside him, his mistress bursts into laughter, as if your pain were mere entertainment. This isn't just betrayal. This is a war between power, justice, and the pride of a father. Follow me. Like, share, and subscribe, because you'll never forget this story. The hospital corridor overflows with the scent of antiseptic, but under those cold fluorescent lights, a crime cloaked in love is about to unfold, and it will silence the entire world. The glaring white fluorescent light pours down onto the icy tile floor. The smell of antiseptic fills the air, that familiar yet haunting odor, as if the whole hospital were built to wash away every stain except the sins of humanity. Evelyn Blake stands at the end of the corridor, her hand gently resting on her rounded belly, feeling the faint heartbeat of the child within. 7 months pregnant, she should be wrapped in love, not standing trembling amid the storm that's about to crash down. Richard Blake, her husband, enters with the stride of a king who's just endured an insult. His tailored gray suit, polished leather shoes, but his eyes are cold as steel. Beside him is Mara Kingsley, the woman with lips painted red like an unhealed wound, smirking as if she's just stepped into a cocktail party rather than a prenatal clinic. The click of her high heels echoes, mingling with Evelyn's pounding heartbeat. Evelyn steps back, her back touching the white tiled wall. She doesn't understand why Richard is here. He never comes to prenatal appointments. She still remembers the last time he made an excuse about a meeting with the Family First Foundation board, that name now sounding like bitter irony. Richard stops in front of her, his eyes etched with contempt. No need to shout. His voice alone tears through the quiet air. The nurses nearby freeze, glancing at each other, but no one dares intervene. A man's voice rises, low and cold. "You've embarrassed me in front of everyone." Evelyn barely manages a soft exhale. Tears well in the corners of her eyes, but she doesn't speak. She's learned to stay silent when the storm brews a survival instinct people call weakness. And then, the slap. The sound rings out like metal striking tile, dry, sharp, stinging. The entire corridor falls still. A few patients look up, a nurse drops her clipboard. That slap doesn't just tear her flesh, it shreds the last remnants of her pride. Mara lets out a soft laugh, the laugh of someone who believes she's winning. Evelyn staggers, one hand clutching her cheek, the other still on her belly. In her mind, the hum of monitor machines echoes, the hiss of the air conditioner, and her own heavy breathing. Everything spins the lights, Richard's face, the overpowering scent of perfume. But deep in the daze, she notices something unusual. A small red flash blinks from the corner of the ceiling, the surveillance camera. Richard doesn't notice. He turns and walks away, pulling Mara along, striding past the crowd that's yet to react. That image, the man with a watch worth a fortune leaving the scene after striking his wife, sears into the memory of everyone present. But one person doesn't just remember, he records. A young medical technician on the night shift accidentally witnesses the entire scene from the CCTV system check screen. An instinct for justice compels him to save a copy of the video before the system automatically overwrites it. Evelyn sinks onto the waiting bench, her trembling hand reaching for a water bottle. She doesn't cry. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because her tears have long since dried up, eroded by Richard over months of silence. Inside her, a void widens, filling with shame, fear, and something else, something flickering, smoldering, unnamed. Outside the window, snow begins to fall lightly. A nurse approaches, offering a cold compress, and softly asking if she wants to call the police. Evelyn just shakes her head. Not because she wants to cover for him, but because she knows this isn't the time. She needs to stand up, to breathe, to keep her child's heartbeat steady. Everything else, she'll figure out later. The corridor lights still blaze as brightly as before, but now, in Evelyn's mind, they're no longer healing light. They're the light of judgment. And somewhere in that light, the first seed of resistance takes root, tiny, but steadfast, like the heartbeat of the life she's carrying. Dear viewers, pause for a moment to hit subscribe to the channel before watching the main part of the story, but only if you truly empathize with what I'm sharing here. And leave a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is now. It's fascinating to see people from everywhere joining us. Before the slap, before the cold hospital light reflected her humiliation onto her face, there was a different Evelyn. An Evelyn who believed in happy endings, in love as a magic that could heal everything. She lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn, where the window overlooked the Hudson River, and the wind carried the salty scent of water, morning coffee, and the steady horn of ships like the rhythm of a simple life. Evelyn worked as an editor for a children's book publisher. The day she met Richard Blake was at a book launch fundraiser for disabled children. He arrived late, amid flashing lights and fawning greetings. A rising tech entrepreneur, founder of a famous virtual real estate platform, with a confident smile and the easy gait of someone who knows the world belongs to him. But what caught her attention wasn't the money. It was the way he looked at her, direct, focused, as if in that crowded room, only she existed. He said he liked reading books, liked fairy tales that didn't end with magic, but with courage. Evelyn laughed. She thought he was different. And perhaps, in that moment, she placed her entire heart into that illusion. The first months of their relationship were a dream. Flowers delivered every morning, long messages stretching into the night. He told her about his deprived childhood, about dreams of building something so grand that no one could make him feel small again. She listened, moved, thinking that pride was a sign of resilience. Only later did she understand. It was the hunger of a man who would devour anyone who dared keep him from being full. When Richard proposed, she said yes. The wedding took place in an old church in Connecticut, not overly lavish, just as Evelyn wanted, but the media still found them. A golden couple, him the tech genius, her the educated, gentle editor. The press called them the Blakes, beauty and brains. Evelyn smiled, reading the headline, unaware it was the last time she'd see her name paired with positive light. At first, the marriage was as sweet as an unfinished book page. They cooked together, watched movies, dreamed of the future. Richard promised he'd always be there. But then, bit by bit, he changed. When his company secured funding, when his name appeared on Forbes, when praise turned to worship, his ego swelled like an unpatchable crack. Long nights, he didn't come home. She stayed awake, hearing the door click shut at dawn, and reassured herself, it's just work. She told herself that hundreds of times, until the words rang hollow. Richard no longer looked at her as a partner. He looked at her like beautiful furniture in an expensive home there to prove he was perfect. She began to feel lost in her own life. Silent dinners, where the clink of cutlery sounded like the ticking of a countdown clock. She sent the final manuscript of a children's book, a story about a girl finding her voice again, and smiled bitterly. Perhaps that work was the cry for help she didn't dare voice. Then came the moment she learned she was pregnant. For the first time, she saw Richard glow like he used to. He talked about legacy, about the Blake lineage, about the heir. She thought perhaps the child would save their marriage. But right after, as work and pressure closed in, he returned to lavish parties, long business trips. Evelyn still believed in the good. She carried the pregnancy in silence, working from home, noting every tiny movement of the baby. She painted the nursery in soft cream, chose books to read aloud, whispering promises. Mom will create the safest world for you. That world shattered on that cold February morning. The first call came from an unknown number, Mara Kingsley. Her voice was sweet, laced with sarcasm, introducing herself as Richard's close colleague. The short message was enough for Evelyn to know everything. That evening, Richard came home, not denying it. He said every marriage has tough phases, that you're too sensitive. When she asked about Mara, he just shrugged. She understands me. Evelyn said nothing more. She went to the nursery, looked at the white crib, and in that moment, she knew everything inside her had changed. Not from jealousy, but from a deep fear that the child would grow up in a home without love. The weeks that followed, the silence between them thickened like fog. Richard grew more distant, while Mara appeared more in his public life. Evelyn avoided the media, avoided friends, and tried to hold on to the fragile peace that remained. But peace doesn't last. One morning, in a company email, She accidentally saw a report from the Family First Foundation, the charity Richard founded. Numbers didn't match. Strange transactions in the Caymans. She meant to ask, but he slammed the door before she could speak. She didn't know those numbers would become weapons in the future, toppling his entire empire. Now, sitting in the cold hospital light where everything began to crumble, Evelyn recalls those peaceful days not with regret, but to understand. Blind love had made her forget her own survival instincts. And amid the chill of steel, the antiseptic smell, and the metallic taste of blood on her lip, she whispers to herself, not aloud, but clear as a vow, "This is the last time you make me bow my head." All right, dear viewers of mine, if you're watching and finding this story interesting, comment number 1, or comment, "I'm still here to keep listening," okay? The video is only 12 seconds long, blurry, tilted, and shaky, but it's enough to make all of America hold its breath. A slap, a choked scream, and a cruel burst of laughter echo through the brightly lit hospital corridor. The clip's title appears on Twitter, "The Slap Heard Across America." Within hours, it's shared millions of times. The public is outraged. Morning news broadcasts replay the video with stern faces. The still image, where Richard's hand is still mid-swing in the air, becomes a symbol of violence and abused power. Public fury ignites. "Justice for Evelyn" posters appear outside the Blake Tech building. Reporters camp day and night, hunting for any reaction from the pregnant wife. But Evelyn says nothing. She remains in silence. Richard, meanwhile, does what he does best: controls the narrative. He holds a press conference, stepping out with his team of lawyers and PR experts, in a perfectly tailored suit. His face is calculatedly weary, his voice lowered like someone who's just endured a shock. He declares, "It was just a misunderstanding, a moment of family tension. I love my wife, and I regret it." Investors start to panic, but his media team quickly launches the "We All Make Mistakes" campaign. Within hours, the hashtag is promoted, spreading like a desperate attempt to whitewash the truth. Mara Kingsley, his mistress, appears in an online magazine interview, answering with a smug smile. Evelyn is sensitive. She's pregnant. After all, one seemingly harmless sentence pours oil on the fire. Public wrath explodes. Women's organizations demand investigations. Brands cut endorsement deals. Within 48 hours, Richard goes from tech icon to poster boy for arrogance and violence. Elsewhere, in the quiet room of her father's house in Connecticut, Evelyn sits by the window. Morning light filters through the curtains, casting thin golden streaks across her pale face. She looks down at her hands where the bruise is fading and feels no longer fear inside. It's a cold emptiness, but also the first clarity in years. Outside, the press still screams her name. They call her the symbol of victims, the brave woman daring to face power. But she doesn't feel brave. She's just surviving. That afternoon, her father enters. Thomas Blake, once Attorney General, now just a silver-haired man with stern eyes that flicker with heartache. He doesn't ask if she's okay, just sets a cup of tea on the table. That's how he shows love through actions, not words. Evelyn sees something different in his eyes. Anger. Not just because his daughter was slapped, but because it happened publicly, before the world, and everyone knows that he, the symbol of law, failed to protect his own. The media calls it the Blake scandal. The stock market reacts immediately. Blake Tech shares plummet, donors pull out. Richard's empire, built on the image of an ideal family, cracks piece by piece. While Richard tries to rebuild his reputation, leaked emails begin to surface. An anonymous account sends documents to the New York Ledger newsroom about suspicious transactions tied to the Family First Foundation, his charity. In one attached photo, Richard's signature appears on a wire transfer to a Cayman Islands company. At first, the media suspects it's a revenge ploy, but then financial investigators take interest. At the same time, Evelyn is contacted by a young woman, Harper Jones, a lawyer specializing in women's rights, a former victim of domestic violence. Harper meets her, carrying a thick stack of files, her voice soft but firm. He uses money to buy silence, will use the truth to reclaim voices. Evelyn listens, not reacting right away, but something stirs in her heart. The next day, She appears in public for the first time since the incident. No speech, no PR team, just her in a long coat, walking through the crowd of reporters in silence. But that silence resonates louder than any words. The cameras capture the moment she places her hand on her belly, her eyes no longer fearful. On social media, a photo goes viral. Evelyn Blake, the woman who didn't bow. Strangers leave thousands of encouraging messages. They write that she's done what they couldn't stand in the storm without bending. On the other side, Richard starts losing control. Mara blames him for the company's downfall. Lawyers withdraw. Investors turn away. Calls from Washington grow sparse. And Evelyn, still silent, prepares with Harper and Thomas for something bigger. In the old library of the estate, where light filters through dusty books, Harper spreads papers across the table. Receipts, statements, fake contracts. Everything ties to the Family First charity. Evelyn quietly reads each line, her eyes pausing at a familiar signature. She realizes it's Richard's signature, but beside it is her name, the nominal co-founder. A thought flashes. If he used this foundation for money laundering, she could turn it into something truly clean, a tool to save people, not cover sins. Outside, the storm of public opinion still rumbles, but inside that room, Evelyn has found her first direction. No longer the woman slapped under fluorescent lights, but the one quietly planning to reclaim justice with the very weapons her enemy used to destroy her: money and reputation. Are you still here, dear viewers of mine? Pause to relax a bit, maybe take a sip of water, then listen to the captivating content ahead. Comment number 1 if you find this story interesting. Don't forget to hit subscribe to the channel. Morning in Connecticut drowns in thin fog. The Blake family estate is cloaked in damp gray, rows of maples shedding golden leaves along the stone-paved drive to the iron gates. Inside, in the vast office carpeted in deep green, Thomas Blake sits silently by the window, his coffee cup cooling in his hand. He doesn't read the papers. He just gazes out, where TV vans still line up beyond the gates, camera lenses pointed at the house like a pack of hunting predators. On the table, headlines lie scattered. Tech millionaire slaps pregnant wife. Blake tech empire on the brink of collapse. Evelyn Blake, the woman publicly betrayed. Thomas isn't one to be swayed by public opinion, but this time is different. The woman in those photos is his daughter, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, face swollen from the slap the whole nation has seen. A dull ache rises in his chest, a feeling power can't hide. He's spent his life protecting justice for others, yet he's powerless before his own daughter's pain. Evelyn enters quietly, like a ghost. She wears a long robe, hands still gently on her belly, face pallid but eyes calm. That calm hurts him more than any tears. No longer the little girl who hid behind him from childhood arguments. Now, before him stands a grown woman who's endured more than anyone should. No words of comfort, just a slight nod, a long silence between generations. He rises from his chair, places a hand on her shoulder. You won't fight alone. The words are short, weighted like a pledge. That very afternoon, he summons a small group from the legal world old associates, not for revenge, but to defend his daughter's honor. He knows justice can't be bought, but reputation can be crushed by truth. News of his involvement spreads fast. TV stations run tickers. Former Attorney General Thomas Blake speaks out. The weight of that name panics Richard's investors. Within 2 days, Blake Tech stock drops another 20%. Meanwhile, in the estate's basement, Harper Jones, the young lawyer, lays out files on the long wooden table. Evelyn stands beside her, eyes tracing the numbers, the transactions from the Family First Foundation. Each statement is a slice of deceit. Harper points to the bank account list. He's laundering money through this. If we prove the foundation is fake, the court will freeze assets. Evelyn is silent, no longer afraid. She feels a new energy inside, not impulsive, not vengeful, but sharp as a mirror. Outside, Richard holds a press conference at company headquarters. He stands before dozens of lenses, forcing a strained smile. His voice trembles slightly but still carries arrogance. Every family has clashes. I love my wife, and hope the media lets us handle this privately. But the public no longer believes. From the crowd below, chants of, "Justice for Evelyn," echo. He stiffens, flustered before the cameras. Behind him, Mara Kingsley stands in the shadows, her fake smile like peeling paint. That evening, Thomas appears on national television. He doesn't name his son-in-law, doesn't threaten, just speaks slowly in the voice of someone who once mastered the law. No man has the right to measure a woman's worth with his hand. Violence isn't a mistake, it's a crime. The statement rings out, cold and final. Viewers everywhere gasp. International press quotes it. Public opinion shifts entirely, from pity to admiration. Evelyn is no longer just a victim. She's a symbol of resolve. That night, she steps onto the balcony, cold wind tousling her hair. Below in the yard, flashbulbs still flicker beyond the gates. She breathes deeply, feeling the baby stir faintly in her belly. The sky above is cloud thick, but somewhere, a faint star gleams. She thinks of Richard, of the contemptuous look as he left the hospital, and she knows this war is no longer private. It's the first tolling bell signaling the downfall of an empire built on arrogance and lies. Harper steps out behind her, softly. Justice sometimes comes late, but it comes. Evelyn nods, a faint smile passing. In the dim light, the shadows of two women stand side by side, one once knocked down, one once survived, gazing toward the city where lights reflect on the sky. They need no promises. Just the knowledge that, from tomorrow, they'll take the first steps to cleanse dirty money and honor, with truth. In the dim light of the old library, files are spread across the mahogany table. Documents, statements, contracts, dry numbers running long like a map of lies. Harper Jones carefully clips each receipt with steel fasteners, her voice low and steady. Family First Foundation isn't a charity, it's a money pipeline. They launder millions through it every year. Evelyn sits silent, eyes fixed on her own signature beside Richard's name on a document, a signature exploited to legitimize the entire crime. She feels a chill run down her spine like cold blood. All this time, Richard hasn't just betrayed their marriage. He's used her very image, the wife, the mother, to turn criminal acts into symbols of humanity. The 4 family campaigns he touted now become a gold-plated mask for shady deals. Harper looks up, eyes grave. We can do 2 things. Send these to the prosecutor, or use them to trap him publicly. But both paths are dangerous. Evelyn doesn't think long. I don't want him just to fall. I want him to be held accountable, and I want this money cleaned. From that day, the plan begins. Harper contacts an independent investigative team that once worked with the Justice Department. Under Thomas Blake's auspices, they gather enough evidence to prove the charity is a sham. Every Cayman transfer, every charitable expense funneled to shell companies is traced back. Evelyn spends nights poring over files, noting details, eyes shadowed but burning with determination. Meanwhile, outside, Richard's world cracks. The press hounds the source of Family First funds. A Wall Street Journal exposé calls it one of the most sophisticated money laundering networks in tech. Shareholders pull capital, the board suspends company operations. Richard responds by denying everything. He hires new lawyers, blames accountants, the media, even Evelyn. In a live interview, he smiles, saying his wife is being manipulated by her father to destroy her husband's career. But the public no longer believes. His once beloved image becomes a symbol of greed and deceit. The internet spreads 2 side-by-side photos, one the hospital slap, the other the laundering scandal news. The caption below reads, "When one slap exposes an entire empire." Evelyn watches it all in silence. She doesn't appear in the media, doesn't rebut. Instead, she works with Harper and financial advisors to prepare the final step, petitioning the court to freeze Family First Foundation assets. It's a huge gamble. If it fails, she'll be accused of complicity in the fraud because her name is still on the foundation files. But if it succeeds, she can legally take control and turn dirty money into aid for the vulnerable. The night before filing, she doesn't sleep. Wind rattles the window frames. The clock ticks steadily. She opens an old journal, writes to her unborn child. Tomorrow, Mom starts over. If anyone asks why, tell them justice doesn't come from anger, but from love. Love for you, and for those without a voice. The next morning, the petition is filed. News spreads fast. Evelyn Blake demands probe into husband's charity. It hits every channel. In his office, Richard hurls his coffee mug at the wall. His rage echoes through the soundproof glass. She dares do this to me. But for the first time, no one answers. Staff quietly pack up. Mara Kingsley vanishes from sight, suitcase in hand and fear in her eyes. That evening, Evelyn sits with her father in the living room. Thomas gazes silently at his daughter, eyes mixing pride and worry. "You've started a war he can't win," he says. She replies softly, "It's not about winning. It's about the truth being seen." Outside the window, snow begins to fall. Gate lights cast onto the sparkling flakes like embers slowly drifting to earth. Evelyn looks out, her heart lightening a fraction. She knows, from that moment, everything has transcended the personal. This is no longer about a broken marriage. It's a battle between truth and power, between the blood of dirty money and the light of justice. All right, dear viewers of mine, if you're watching and finding this story interesting, comment number 1 or comment, "I'm still here," to keep listening, okay? The day of the official investigation announcement. Boston's sky is overcast and damp. Rain falls thin as mist, but the air holds something ready to explode. Reporters crowd the federal courthouse steps, microphones thrust high, lenses poised to capture the first moment of the case titled, "Blake versus the Truth." Evelyn arrives early, in a deep blue dress, hair neatly pinned. Beneath her coat, her pregnant belly protrudes high, clear and proud. She hides no longer. Beside her are Harper and Thomas, standing firm as pillars amid the noisy sea of people. As the courtroom doors open, the din sucks away. Her footsteps ring out in clear, calm rhythm, without hesitation. In the dim light of the old library, files are spread across the mahogany table. Documents, statements, contracts, dry numbers running long like a map of lies. Harper Jones carefully clips each receipt with steel fasteners, her voice low and steady. Family First Foundation isn't a charity, it's a money pipeline. They launder millions through it every year. Evelyn sits silent, eyes fixed on her own signature beside Richard's name on a document. A signature exploited to legitimize the entire crime. She feels a chill run down her spine like cold blood. All this time, Richard hasn't just betrayed their marriage. He's used her very image, the wife, the mother, to turn criminal acts into symbols of humanity. The For Family campaigns he touted now become a gold-plated mask for shady deals. Harper looks up, eyes grave. "We can do two things. Send these to the prosecutor, or use them to trap him publicly. But both paths are dangerous." Evelyn doesn't think long. "I don't want him just to fall. I want him to be held accountable, and I want this money cleaned." From that day, the plan begins. Harper contacts an independent investigative team that once worked with the Justice Department. Under Thomas Blake's auspices, they gather enough evidence to prove the charity is a sham. Every Cayman transfer, every charitable expense funneled to shell companies is traced back. Evelyn spends nights poring over files, noting details, eyes shadowed but burning with determination. Meanwhile, outside, Richard's world cracks. The press hounds the source of Family First funds. A Wall Street Journal expose calls it one of the most sophisticated money laundering networks in tech. Shareholders pull capital. The board suspends company operations. Richard responds by denying everything. He hires new lawyers, blames accountants, the media, even Evelyn. In a live interview, he smiles, saying his wife is being manipulated by her father to destroy her husband's career. But the public no longer believes. His once beloved image becomes a symbol of greed and deceit. The internet spreads two side-by-side photos, one the hospital slap, the other the laundering scandal news. The caption below reads, "When one slap exposes an entire empire." Evelyn watches it all in silence. She doesn't appear in the media, doesn't rebut. Instead, she works with Harper and financial advisors to prepare the final step, petitioning the court to freeze Family First Foundation assets. It's a huge gamble. If it fails, she'll be accused of complicity in the fraud, because her name is still on the foundation files. But if it succeeds, she can legally take control and turn dirty money into aid for the vulnerable. The night before filing, she doesn't sleep. Wind rattles the window frames. The clock ticks steadily. She opens an old journal, writes to her unborn child. Tomorrow, Mom starts over. If anyone asks why, tell them justice doesn't come from anger, but from love. Love for you, and for those without a voice. The next morning, the petition is filed. News spreads fast. Evelyn Blake demands probe into husband's charity. It hits every channel. In his office, Richard hurls his coffee mug at the wall. His rage echoes through the soundproof glass. She dares do this to me. But for the first time, no one answers. Staff quietly pack up. Mara Kingsley vanishes from sight, suitcase in hand and fear in her eyes. That evening, Evelyn sits with her father in the living room. Thomas gazes silently at his daughter, eyes mixing pride and worry. "You've started a war he can't win," he says. She replies softly, "It's not about winning. It's about the truth being seen." Outside the window, snow begins to fall. Gate lights cast onto the sparkling flakes like embers slowly drifting to earth. Evelyn looks out, her heart lightening a fraction. She knows, from that moment, everything has transcended the personal. This is no longer about a broken marriage. It's a battle between truth and power, between the blood of dirty money and the light of justice. All right, dear viewers of mine, if you're watching and finding this story interesting, comment number 1 or comment, "I'm still here," to keep listening, okay? The day of the official investigation announcement, Boston's sky is overcast and damp. Rain falls thin as mist, but the air holds something ready to explode. Reporters crowd the federal courthouse steps, microphones thrust high, lenses poised to capture the first moment of the case titled, "Blake versus the Truth." Evelyn arrives early, in a deep blue dress, hair neatly pinned. Beneath her coat, her pregnant belly protrudes high, clear, and proud. She hides no longer. Beside her are Harper and Thomas, standing firm as pillars amid the noisy sea of people. As the courtroom doors open, the din sucks away. Her footsteps ring out in clear, calm rhythm, without hesitation. Inside the courtroom, Richard waits. Dark suit, deep red tie, face taut from lack of sleep. But his gaze remains arrogant, the look of a man who once believed money could bend anything. Beside him, his lawyer flips documents, nodding slightly as Evelyn enters. She doesn't look at him. No need. Everything that needs saying is in the thick file Harper holds. The trial opens with financial evidence. The prosecutor displays massive transaction charts, wires through Cayman, Luxembourg, looping back to Family First. Each new figure on screen stirs whispers. Richard sits rigid, feigning calm, but his hands clench white-knuckled. Evelyn listens, unblinking. Each piece of evidence carves into the wall of lies Richard built. Then Harper's lawyer rises, her voice clear and cold. "Your Honor, these funds were nominally co-founded by Mrs. Evelyn Blake, but without her consent or knowledge. Mr. Richard Blake used his wife's name to launder money, turning dirty dollars into symbols of charity." The courtroom falls pin-drop silent. The lights beam down, freezing every face. Richard inhales deeply, ready to retort, but the prosecutor immediately screens another video, his interview 3 months prior, proudly stating, "My wife and I built Family First together to help struggling mothers." His laughter in the video echoes back like self-mockery. The room erupts in murmurs. Richard glances around, seeking support, but all eyes evade. Mara Kingsley, his mistress, sits at the back of the gallery, face ashen. She knows she's on the list of accomplices. Mid-session, court recesses, Evelyn steps into the hall, where press waits. A reporter asks, "Are you afraid, facing your husband?" She pauses, eyes straight into the lens. "No, I'm only afraid of silence, because silence is what makes men like him think they'll never be punished." Then she walks on, without looking back. As proceedings resume, Thomas Blake is called as a witness. He stands tall, voice deep as a bronze bell. "I'm not here as former Attorney General. I'm here as a father. My son-in-law didn't just abuse my daughter. He betrayed the trust of hundreds who believed in goodness. and I won't let a man like that redefine justice. No one breathes. Richard bows his head, jaw twitching. His lawyer objects futilely, overruled. The prosecutor unveils a prenup signed 4 years ago, original held by Thomas himself. Per its terms, if Richard cheats or abuses, all joint assets transfer to Evelyn. The gavel's sound rings like a death knell. Richard freezes, eyes unfocused. Everything crumbles in that instant, not by the court, but by the greed that led him here. Mara sobs, fleeing the room. Evelyn looks at him for the first time since entering. No hatred, just finality. He opens his mouth to speak, but the judge interrupts, declaring assets frozen. Family First transferred to independent oversight. The courtroom buzzes with chatter. Press films. A historic moment. The woman publicly slapped has brought her slapper to his knees before justice. As Evelyn exits the courthouse, midday light falls on her face. Reporters swarm again, asking if she feels victorious. She smiles faintly. Justice isn't victory, it's a beginning. On the courthouse steps, Thomas places a hand on his daughter's shoulder, Harper beside them, and amid the flashing bulbs, Evelyn holds her head high. She's walked through humiliation, through darkness, and now steps into light where she's no longer a victim, but a symbol of rebirth. A week after the trial, Richard Blake's empire collapses entirely. Subsidiaries are probed, stocks freefall, and his name vanishes from power lists. The media shifts to Evelyn, the woman once behind the lights, now the center, but she seeks no spotlight. As the noise fades, Evelyn retreats to the Connecticut estate, where it all began. Winter yields to spring, snow melts to reveal fresh grass patches, and the old house floods with warm golden light. In the library, once piled with laundering files, now stacks plans for rebuilding. Harper Jones, with lawyers and financial experts, works tirelessly. Noted documents scatter the table. At the top of one page, Evelyn's handwritten line, "Grant Women's Hope Foundation." She wants to use the recovered funds from Blake Tech and Family First to create something new, not for revenge, but transformation. If he used money to silence victims, she tells Harper, I'll use it to help them speak. Harper nods faintly, smiling. She knows Evelyn has transcended pain's limits. Now she fights not for herself, but for all women once silenced. The foundation launch is held in Boston, in a glass building reflecting the sky. No lavish runway, no red carpet, just natural light, white flowers, and neatly arranged chairs. Evelyn steps to the stage, hair low-tied, face serene. Hundreds attend, women who've endured violence, activists, journalists who followed the story. Thomas sits front row, eyes quiet but brimming with pride. As she begins speaking, the room hushes. A year ago, I was struck down, not just by a slap, but by silence. But that silence taught me the most important lesson. Gentleness isn't weakness. Trust isn't a mistake. We're only weak when we let fear define us. Her voice is low, steady, each word pulsing like a heartbeat. Below, some weep. Harper glances at Thomas, seeing the steel man nod faintly. He's won many cases in life, but none as profound as this victory of mercy. As the event ends, sunlight pours through the glass, bathing Evelyn and her pregnant belly in a halo-like glow. Photographers capture it. The image spreads across social media with the caption, "From violence to hope." That evening, in the room where everything once shattered, Evelyn sits writing a letter to her unborn son. Alexander, you were born into a noisy world, where justice sometimes arrives late, but I want you to know truth has its own power. I've seen greed crumble, watched the cruel bound by their own sins. And I learned, no one can take your dignity unless you surrender it yourself. She sets the pen down, feeling a light kick from within, like a reply, a life answering its mother that it's ready. Evelyn smiles softly. Out there, Richard awaits trial on further fraud charges. Mara Kingsley, who once laughed in the hospital corridor, now lives in hiding, dodging lenses. And Family First Foundation, under Evelyn's control, becomes Grant Women's Hope, the first government-recognized conversion of illicit funds into legitimate humanitarian aid. A new symbol born from the ashes of deceit. Harper enters, holding the morning paper. Front page. Evelyn's photo and headline. The woman who cleaned dirty money and purged her world. Evelyn chuckles softly. Not the world, she says. Just my piece of it. Night falls. She opens the window. Gentle wind carrying jasmine's scent into the room. City lights reflect on the walls like shifting ribbons. Everything is still, no noise, no cameras, no shadow of Richard, just warmth, breath, and peace. In that silence, Evelyn whispers, "We've done it." In the distance, wind mingles with church bells, tolling like the universe's affirmation. Her life no longer revolves around pain or betrayal. It has become a story of strength, strength from mercy, from rising without retaliation. And as night closes, Evelyn Grant is no longer the woman slapped in the hospital corridor. She is the one who rewrote her own story, leaving the world an indelible truth. When dirty money is laundered by integrity, it becomes power. And when a woman rises for justice, the whole world must listen. Sunset drapes the old stone steps of the Grant estate, where Evelyn cradles her son in her arms. The child's soft laughter blends with the wind, dissolving into the quiet expanse. Her life has passed through fire, through shame, through buildings of power and rooms of deceit to now, standing under a peaceful sky, she realizes the greatest victory isn't felling others, but keeping her own heart from turning to stone. Richard has lost everything. Cassandra has vanished from the lights, but Evelyn speaks of them no more. She doesn't need to. She's turned pain into legacy, a foundation named for hope, a voice for those once silent like her. In a noisy world, Evelyn chooses to win with poise. When Harper arrives, they look at each other and smile. "It's over," Harper says. Evelyn replies softly, "No, it's just beginning." Inside the house, Thomas Blake watches his daughter, his eyes no longer the stern gaze of a powerful father, but the rare tenderness of a proud one. Evelyn steps to the porch, gazing at the horizon where light fades. Her voice rises lightly, like a promise. Every woman has her moment, the moment she chooses to rise not for revenge, but to live truly. If you've journeyed with her through this, share that story. Because somewhere, someone needs to know they're strong enough to rise too. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel because you won't want to miss Evelyn Grant's next story.